I've just discovered some acrylic hobby paint that comes in dropper bottles. There's over 100 different colors in the range. They're about the same price as Vallejo. They're from a British company that's been in and around the hobby for decades. And for some reason, I've never heard anyone talk about them before. I'm going to reveal who they are at the end of the video, but before then, let me know in the comments who you think they are. Now I've picked up 4 colors. I've got fluoro, green, blue, and purple, and I'm going to test them out and just see how well they work. All right, so for my first test, I'm just going to chuck the purple into my airbrush and see how well it works. And the answer is not very well at all. For some reason, I thought these were airbrush paints, and they're not. They're not airbrush paints at all. They're just normal acrylic paints. So if this is the high quality, well-researched hobby content you are after, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more of this. All right, so let's airbrush it properly this time. So I'm going to thin my paints down with my Army Painter Airbrush Medium, which is sort of a mix of flow improver and thinners. So I'm just trying this with the purple and the fluoro colors, and so far it's working okay. When they're thinned down, they're going through that airbrush fine, they're not clogging up, and the patterns I'm getting out of them are pretty smooth. Just on this piece of paper, I can't tell too much so far. The paints don't seem super saturated, but I wouldn't really expect it from these sorts of colors. All right, so paper's not very realistic, so let's do it on some actual minis. So I've got these Rune War minis that I have laying around, and I'm gonna take the blue and airbrush the Rune Wars minis. This is going pretty well. The blue seems to definitely be much more saturated and have better coverage. It's really covering up the gray primer on the minis. It's looking pretty good so far with the airbrush. I am noticing that the blue is quite glossy, but I have a theory on why that's the case, which I'll get to later in the video. If you're looking to pick up these mystery paints or the Army Painter Airbrush Medium, which I really like, then check out the links in the description below. And if you do get anything, then that will support this channel. So I've discovered these are not airbrush paints, which I initially thought. They're just normal paints that can be thinned down for an airbrush. So let's just do some normal painting with these paints with a mini and a brush. So I got some more Rune Wars minis, and I've decided to chuck all 4 colors onto these guys and just see how they feel. My first impressions with the fluoro and the purple is they're quite thin and the pigments are a bit separated. The fluoro was also quite sort of clumpy and gloopy and had a really weird texture. It's very similar to my Army Painter Witch Brew, which is just a very weird color to use. Not great so far with the fluoro. The green and the blue are going on pretty well. They are both a bit thick, especially the green, but they're going on and they're giving decent coverage, especially the blue, it's got good coverage. Now what I'm seeing here with the separated pigments and the paints being super glossy, I have seen that before with some of my other paints where they just weren't mixed properly. I've had that with some washes where they were just really glossy, and once I gave them a really, really good mix, then they were nowhere near as glossy the next time I painted with them. Now I remember these paints, I didn't actually get them from a hobby store, I got them from more like a model train sort of place, and I'm not sure if the paints were flying off the shelves at that sort of store. The pigments and the medium were quite separated in the bottles when I bought them, and I have given them a good mix, but I'm not sure if they're fully mixed yet. I tried to get the nozzles off to put agitator balls in, and I couldn't get the nozzles off, which is kind of annoying. So I do have a vortex mixer which I use, but no agitator balls. So I've airbrushed these paints and I've hand brushed these paints onto minis. But you know, the minis have all these weird surfaces and the paints are not properly mixed yet, so it's not quite a fair test. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give them a real good mix with my vortex mixer as best as I can do, and I'm going to just paint them onto some flat plastic that I have primed. So I've got black primer on the plastic, and now I'm going to take each color and I'm going to do 3 lines. The first line is going to be a thin coat, the second line is going to be 2 thin coats, and then the third line is going to be 3 thin coats. So the fluoro color is just kind of awful. You know, I picked up the fluoro because it looked cool, but I had the feeling that with all that yellow and orange in it, it wasn't going to be a great color to use. So even with a section that has 3 coats on it, it's still clumpy and gloopy and weird and has very bad coverage. So it's not a great paint to use, the orange one. So the green, I like the color. Its coverage is okay. It gets better with each coat. There is one problem though, and that's the paint is super thick. It's like thicker than toothpaste thick. I don't know what's gone wrong. I have the feeling that it wasn't stored properly and something's happened to it, because it's way thicker than any mini paint should ever be. You know, but once I thinned it down with water, the pigment and the color seems to come out okay, and I got decent coverage. So I think if I had a fresh bottle that wasn't weird, then it would be decent. The blue was pretty nice. It was a little bit thicker than I would normally like, but it thinned out nicely. Coverage was pretty good after 2 coats. I did notice the green, blue, and fluoro were still a bit glossy. So I don't know if that's just how the paints are, or it's still the storage issue and them not being mixed fully, especially with how the green and blue are thick and the fluoro is just weird texture. But onto the final color, purple. And once this color has been mixed up properly, it's really nice. So with the brush, it's just like the texture of it is sort of like this nice creamy texture. It's really nice on the brush and flows out really well. It thins down nicely, and it's also got great coverage. So even the first coat had nice coverage, and once you had 2 coats on, the coverage was great. It's nowhere near as glossy as the others. I would say it's matte or satin, I'm not quite sure, but it's much better than the other colors. I just really like this purple. It's really nice. So here is the big reveal. I hope some of you got it right in the comments, but these paints are from Humbrol. So it's the Humbrol acrylic paint range. So Humbrol's more associated with model trains and model cars, and they've got those enamel paints that have been around for years and years and years. At some point they've started making this acrylic paint range, and it's pretty big now, but I've not heard anyone talk about it in the miniature space. Maybe it's more known in that hobby space. But yeah, if anyone has actually used these paints and has some different experiences, let me also know in the comments below, because I'm interested to find out if my mixed results were just because they've been sitting in the store for too long. I hope you liked this video. If you have, then please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more hobby content. Have a great day. Cheers.